Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'll be sharing with you a tutorial on how to cut and sew this stylish draped yoke Queen Anne neckline corset with a slight basque and draping at the lower part. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. Let's dive right into today's video. So to start, here is my pattern. And I've gone ahead to mark out my basic measurements, which includes my shoulder to bust, under bust and waistline. Now we have a slight basque, which is about 2.5 to 3 inches at the lower part of the waistline. After that, go ahead to mark your shoulder divided by 2. From that point, come down by 1 inch. Now I'll place my ruler and I'll draw out a straight or slanted line to this point. Next, you want to find your chest line, which is your armhole, and to find that is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. Mine is 7. I place my ruler on that line and I'll go ahead to draw out a straight line. So after I'm done drawing this out, that measurement I have at the shoulder, which is my shoulder divided by 2, giving me 7, I'll mark. Go ahead and connect and draw a straight line. Now I'll divide what I have into 2 and I'll mark. Come in by ½ inch at this point. At the chest line, I'll go ahead and mark my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 33 inches divided by 4, giving me 8. I'll connect to the ½ inch at the center, and from the upper part, I'll go ahead to connect. And after I'm done connecting, I'll go ahead and use my marker to outline my pattern. From here, the next step you want to take is to mark your dart. And to mark your dart is your nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches. Divided by 2, I have 3.5 inches, which I'm going to mark all the way from the upper part of my pattern to the lower part of my pattern, and also take it down all the way to the basque area. Now, after I'm done marking this, you want to mark your dart intake of 1 inch on both sides of this pattern. And I'll go ahead to mark this. If you're a plus size or you're a bit busty, you can use 1.5 inches on both sides of this pattern. After this, I'll place my ruler and I'm going to connect, drawing out a straight line, and I will repeat this at the other side of my pattern also. After I'm done connecting, I'll place my curve through, connecting from my bust to my under bust. After that, I'll go ahead to connect to the other side of my pattern this way. Now, after I'm done connecting this, I'm going to go ahead to use my marker to outline this to make it more visible for you to see. Now, you want to determine where your corset cup will start. Now, I'm marking 1.5 inches from my chest line. That is above my chest line. This is not a standard. You can use whatever that suits you. Now, I'll place my ruler and I'll draw out a straight line. After I'm done drawing this, I'll go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple back again at this point. And I'll go ahead to connect, drawing out a straight line to that point. Next, I'll be marking a dart intake of 1 inch on both sides. Now, if you're a plus size, you should mark 1.5 inches on both sides, or you can mark 1 inch at the part going towards the center and 2 inches at the side. Now, if your bust is a lot bigger, you can go ahead to mark 2.5 inches by the side of your corset. Now, I'll go ahead to insert my body measurement. My bust is 33 inches divided by 4. I have 8.3. Measure this dart intake here and I will replace. Now, I'll go ahead to add my sewing allowance of 1.5 inches. This 1.5 inches is not a standard. This totally depends on the allowance you want on your dress. I'll mark my under bust circumference divided by 4. My under bust is 28 divided by 4. I have 7 inches. I'll measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance. Now, at the waistline of my corset, I just want to take out 2 inches from the waistline. Waistline is 28 minus 2 will give me 26 inches. So I'll mark that 26 inches divided by 4, giving me 6.5. I marked, replaced the dart intake and added my sewing allowance. Now you're going to go ahead to connect all your pattern from the bust to the under bust and down to the waist. After you're done marking this, for the basque area, we are going to extend it after we are done marking the sides of our corset. So after this, you're going to decide the measurement you want to use for the basque. I'm using 2.5 because the basque is not much. So come in by your sewing allowance first, because your waistline at the back should match your waistline at the front by the side. After this, I'll blend in the dots and I'll go ahead and draw this out. So the basque has like a little roundish effect, and after this is what you're going to have on your pattern. Now we are going to move over to drawing out the cup of this corset. Now I'll take my chest line, go in by 1/2 inch, and I'll mark. So you notice the neckline is not so deep and the cup is not so deep also. So I'll just go ahead and connect this way. Place my curved rule and I'll go ahead to connect to that point. On this other side, there are several ways to mark out your cup by the side. So you can go ahead to use your nipple to nipple divided by 2 and add 1/2 inch to it. Or if you don't want to use that method, you can go ahead and divide what you have here into 2 between your bust circumference and the armhole line. So if you use any of the methods, you go ahead to achieve almost the same result. Now I'll connect my cup and I'll slant this down. So after I'm done marking this, the next step is to work on the yoke of this corset. So for the yoke part of this corset, I'll mark 3 inches for the neckline, come in slightly, and I'm going to connect. Now this is my yoke, and to get rid of the bulginess for the sleeve, to tighten the yoke area, I'll go out by 0.35 and I'll shade that out. So here is my cup. So for this pattern, I'm using a bust dart, but I forgot to mark it now. So after I'm done cutting out my pattern, I went ahead to add my bust dart to my pattern. But if you're a beginner and making use of a bust dart is difficult for you, you can go ahead to just cut out your basic corset this way. So after I'm done cutting out my corset pattern, this is what I have. So now I'm going to mark my bust dart. And to get your bust dart is the distance between your shoulder to waist in front and your shoulder to waist at the back. My shoulder to waist in front is 17 inches. My shoulder to waist at the back is 15.5. So if you take out 15.5 from 17, what you're going to have is 1.5, which I marked, and I placed my cup with the bodice and I marked it out, then I blended it out this way. So moving over to the back pattern, I've gone ahead to mark out all my basic measurements just like we did for the front. So if you notice, my shoulder to waist is 15.5 for this pattern. And for this corset, I'm making use of a zipper. I'll also be explaining for those that want to use a lacing bar. So after this, the next step you need to take is to mark your nipple to nipple. And my nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2 will give me 3.5, which I went ahead to mark, and I'll draw out a straight line. After this, you want to go ahead and mark 1/2 inch on both sides of your pattern, and after marking that, you're going to come down by 1 inch at the bust. Now you're going to place your ruler and connect at both sides of this dart intake. So after marking that, you want to also insert your measurement. So to mark my measurement at the bust, you're going to mark your bust circumference divided by 4. And after that, you add your sewing allowance. So I forgot to mark that, but I will remark that later. At the waist, I used the same waistline for the front and I marked, then replace the dart intake and add my sewing allowance. You also want to go ahead to add back that sewing allowance that you did not add. Now I'll go ahead and cut out my pattern, and after this we'll go ahead to alter the rest of the corset pattern. So next, go ahead to mark your neckline of 3 inches and extend it all the way down to still create that neckline we have at the front. If you don't want to use this same neckline, you can go ahead to mark the basic back pattern. So I also came up by 0.3 inches to tighten the yoke area. Now I'll come down by 1/2 inch here, and I'll go ahead to connect this all the way to the upper part of my pattern this way. So now I'll go in by 1/2 inch here and I'll extend this up. This is to get rid of the bulginess at the back of the dress. Now I'll extend this back, and if you're making your corset with a lacing bar, you go in by 2 inches after your zipper allowance, or 1.5 inches. And after this, I'll just go ahead to cut out my pattern, and you can decide to go ahead to blend in your dart or cut out your pattern into 2 pieces. So for the skirt part, first I'll mark out my zipper allowance for the back. So I want to use the same pattern to cut the front and also for the back. So I'll go ahead to mark my zipper allowance in front first, which I'll be folding in. So the next step is to place your tape and mark from your waist to your full length of your dress. So for the full length of my dress, I'm making it like a 3/4 gown, and I'm using 45 inches. So I'll go ahead and connect this all the way to the other end. So I'm not so tall, so 45 inches will go a long way for my dress. So I'll go ahead to cut this out, and next I'll just fold this. After I'm done folding it, now I'm going to go ahead to start taking my measurements. I'm going to mark 7 inches to get my hip point. So if you're a much taller person, go ahead to use 8 inches. So after that, you want to place your tape starting from your waist, and you're going to measure your knee point. So after that, I'll go ahead to rule a line at my hip point and also my knee point. So you want to give your skirt a fitted effect at the lower part. So from your knee line, come up by 2 inches and you're going to mark. And after drawing out that line, we'll go ahead and start inserting our measurements. So at the waistline of my pattern, remember the waistline we used for the skirt, we snatched out 2 inches. So that waistline that you minused, that is 28 inches minus 2, giving you 26, divided by 4 will give you 6.5, and I added my sewing allowance. At the hip, I added my hip circumference divided by 4 plus 10, and I added my sewing allowance. So whatever you have at the hip line, minus 2 inches from it. Now you mark it at that 2 inches line that you came up by the knee, and that is the same measurement you take at the lower part. So after this, go ahead and place your curve through, and you're going to connect. After connecting, go ahead to blend out the hip area to avoid it from being too pointy. And from the lower part, I'll go ahead to connect to the end. Now I'll go ahead to cut out my skirt pattern. After cutting it, I'll bring out the zipper allowance in front. At the zipper allowance, I'll come down by ½ inch and extend. The reason why I'm doing this is so that at the back of your skirt, you won't have this bulginess popping up there. So join us in our next video where we'll be sewing this pattern. If you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button.